Teenage Donnie Darko lives in a suburban area in Maryland. He is a schizophrenic with a history of violence, who recently stopped taking his medicine, which has caused him to start sleepwalking. His sisters Elizabeth and Samantha, as well as his parents Rose and Eddie, are concerned about him. During a foul-mouthed confrontation between Donnie and his sister one evening at supper, Elizabeth confesses that she is aware that Donnie is no longer taking his medicine. In his bedroom, Donnie is confronted by Rose, and he calls her a bitch. Donnie resumes his medicine after admitting guilt. On October 2nd though, he sleepwalks and encounters Frank, a man dressed as a scary-looking bunny. Frank tells him that in 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes and 12 seconds, the world will end. The Darko's home's roof is unexpectedly breached that evening by a jet engine, damaging Donnie's room. He would have been killed if he hadn't been sleepwalking. That morning, Donnie was found sleeping on the golf course by Dr. Fisher and Jim Cunningham. As he stands up, he sees the days, hours, minutes, and seconds before the world ends written on his arm. Donnie goes home and sees the jet engine being lifted from their home. His family was so glad to see him, and Samantha says the engine fell in his room. Bob Garland, a representative of the FAA, asks them to talk privately to sign some papers and arrange a hotel for them to stay in. At school, Donnie is greeted by his friends Sean Smith and Ronald Fisher, who calls him a celebrity because he cheated death. Ronald offers Charita a cigarette and she tells him to shut up. Ms. Pomeroy, their English class teacher, reads a passage from Graham Greene's book called The Destructors. She then asks Donnie what the passage means, to which he answers that the kids just wanted to see what happens when they tear the world apart. Gretchen Ross, the new girl in school, enters the classroom. She asks where she could sit, and Ms. Pomeroy lets her sit beside Donnie. Donnie and Eddie are on their way to the office of Dr. Thurman, Donnie's therapist, when they almost collide with Roberta Sparrow, also known as Grandma Death. Grandma Death, an elderly woman who spends her days pacing back and forth from her home to the mailbox across the street, whispers something to Donnie. At Dr. Thurman's office, Donnie tells her that he made a new imaginary friend named Frank. When asked what Frank said to him, he said that Frank wants him to follow him into the future and that the world is coming to an end. At school, teacher Kitty Farmer makes her students watch a self-help video from motivational speaker Jim Cunningham. The video is about controlling fear. Donnie hears Frank telling him to pay close attention or he could miss something. A few days later, Frank appears to Donnie in a hallucination and encourages him to flood the private high school he attends by breaking open the water main with an axe. The next day, while Donnie and his friends are waiting at the bus stop, a group of students tells them that school is cancelled because it's flooded. At school, Principal Cole is in disbelief at the situation and how someone could embed an axe on the head of the school mascot statue, which is made of solid bronze. They also saw a spray-painted writing on the sidewalk that reads, "They made me do it." Meanwhile, Gretchen is being harassed by the two school bullies Seth Devlin and Ricky Danforth. Donnie sees this and tells them that school is cancelled. Gretchen asks Donnie to walk her home, to which he agrees. During the walk, Gretchen reveals that her stepfather nearly killed her mother and is still on the loose. Donnie reveals his own troubled past as well as his intelligence. Gretchen tells Donnie that he is weird and that this makes him attractive. They decide to start dating. The next day at school, Ms. Pomeroy notices that Donnie is nervous as an investigation is being conducted regarding the school flood incident. Principal Cole calls the students one by one to write the phrase, "They made me do it," on the board. After Donnie's turn, Cole writes a question mark on his name. Later that night, after taking his pill, Donnie hears Frank's voice who tells him not to worry because he got away with the flooding. Donnie asks Frank why he made him flood the school. Frank answers that the students are in great danger. Donnie asks him where he came from, and Frank answers by asking Donnie if he believes in time travel. The conversation is cut short when Samantha asks Donnie who he is talking to. The next day, Kitty Farmer makes her students watch one of Jim Cunningham's self-help videos again. Afterward, she gives them an exercise about the polar extremes of Lifeline, which is divided into two, fear and love, according to Jim Cunningham. When Donnie reads the dilemma, he says he doesn't get it and argues that she can't just lump things into two categories and deny everything else. Kitty says that if Donnie doesn't complete the test, he will get a 0. Donnie says some profane words to her, which lands him in Principal Coles's office. Because of this, Donnie is prohibited to participate in after-school activities for 6 months. The next day, Donnie approaches Mr. Monatoff to ask about time travel. They talked about wormholes and discussed Stephen Hawking's theory. Mr. Monatoff then gave Donnie a book called The Philosophy of Time Travel, written by Roberta Sparrow, now known as Grandma Death. On Donnie's next appointment with Dr. Thurman, he reveals what Grandma Death whispered to him a few days ago, which was, every living creature on Earth dies alone. He also said that he thinks Frank wants him to talk to her to know more about time travel. Later that night, while watching TV with his dad and friends, he notices tubes of fluid light coming out of the chests of people around him, indicating where they will go. Eventually, a tube of fluid light also came out of his chest, which led him to his parents' room, and finds a gun his father keeps in a box in the closet. Donnie and Gretchen get closer. She is one of the few individuals with whom he shares his time travel visions, and the two of them talk about how they wish they could go back in time to stop the awful things from occurring to them. Dr. Thurman talks to Donnie's parents and increases his medication. Jim Cunningham, a motivational speaker, and self-help guru visit Donnie's high school to give a motivational speech. During the speech, Cunningham preaches about the importance of living in the present and disregards the idea of fate and the unknown. As the speech goes, Donnie tells Gretchen that they are moving in time. Donnie comes up to the mic and asks Jim how much he's being paid to be there. Jim tells him that he is a troubled and confused man, to which Donnie agrees, and then calls Jim an antichrist. He is then escorted out of the room as the students clap for him. Later that afternoon, Donnie and Gretchen visit Grandma Death to talk to her about time travel. As Donnie peeks into the mailbox, Gretchen sees Grandma Death staring down at them. Donnie hears Frank's voice urging him to send her a letter. On his way home, Donnie picks up a wallet laying on the ground, which belongs to Jim Cunningham. He hears Frank's voice telling him that now he knows where Jim lives. Donnie and Gretchen watch a scary film one evening. Gretchen falls asleep and Frank appears. When Donnie asks Frank to remove his bunny suit, Frank asks Donnie to remove his human suit, then agrees and takes the head off, revealing a young adult with a gruesome lesion in his right eye. When Donnie asks about the cause of the eye wound, Frank whispers, "I am so sorry," and then directs Donnie's attention to the movie screen. Frank shows him a portal, and instructs him to burn Jim Cunningham's house to the ground. Donnie follows Frank's instructions and leaves Gretchen in the theater as she sleeps. While Jim hosts the school talent show, Donnie goes to his house. He pours gasoline all over the place and sets it on fire. He went back to the theater afterwards. The next morning, Cunningham is arrested because of the kiddie porn dungeon discovered at his home after the fire. Cunningham's friend and ardent supporter Kitty Farmer decides she must lead his public defense and invites Rose to travel to Los Angeles with the school's dance team, Sparkle Motion, so they may participate in Star Search. The lead dancer for Sparkle Motion is Samantha, and Rose accepts despite her better judgment. Donnie is back at Dr. Thurman's office where she performs hypnosis on him. He unknowingly confesses that he was responsible for the flooding of their school and the burning of Jim's house. Upon waking up, Dr. Thurman tells Donnie that he can stop taking his medication as they are just placebos. Elizabeth and Donnie plan to organize a Halloween party to celebrate her acceptance to Harvard. When her mother mysteriously vanished the night before the party, Gretchen went to Donnie's house for protection. Donnie comforts her and they make love, ignoring phone calls from Donnie's desperate therapist, and Rose, who calls to announce that Sparkle Motion won their initial Star Search competition and that they will return on a red-eye flight that night. Donnie experiences another hallucination about the fluid light tunnels at midnight. He understands that the 28 days are up and that there are now just 6 hours left before the end of the world. Donnie convinces Gretchen and 2 other friends to accompany him to Grandma Death's home because he believes she is somehow related to Frank. When they arrive, the local bullies from the high school attack them. Gretchen is thrown dazed into the road, where she is struck and killed by a car driven by Frank, Elizabeth's boyfriend, who is on his way to their Halloween party. Frank is wearing the creepy bunny costume that Donnie's hallucination wears. Donnie kills Frank by shooting him in the right eye with his father's gun, then brings Gretchen's body home. He steals the car keys from a sleeping Elizabeth and, taking Gretchen with him, drives into the hills above town. Donnie can see a time tunnel forming above the town from that vantage point. The red-eye flight carrying Rose and Sparkle Motion enters the turbulence created by the time tunnel, and one of the engines on the jet breaks free and falls into it. Donnie gives Gretchen a loving glance before driving through the time portal. Donnie is back on October 2nd. He is laughing while lying in bed. Shortly after he goes to sleep, the jet engine from the red-eye flight on October 30th crashes through the roof, killing him. Throughout town, Dr. Thurman, Mr. Monatoff, Jim Cunningham, Kitty Farmer, and Frank are all suddenly troubled and sad. Gretchen rides her bike to the Darkos' home the following morning. Elizabeth, Eddie, and Samantha stand sobbing as Donnie's corpse is taken away, while Rose smokes a cigarette a few feet away, doing her best to deal with the fact that her last encounter with her troubled son was the unpleasant confrontation in his bedroom. Gretchen finds out from a young boy what had happened and who the family is, as she had never met Donnie. She timidly waves to Rose after being moved by the tragedy. Rose waves back, touched by the thoughtfulness of the stranger. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new release. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.